Ravens flock, the flock rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. So I'm telling you now, it's about to go down. The podcast, the flock rundown. Ravens, baby. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
Appreciate you, Ray. What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Still celebrating that win from yesterday. Happy New Year, everyone. I knew the national media would be talking a lot about the Ravens and there'd be a big hype train. I am a little surprised that Richard Sherman is still sticking to his stat point that Lamar shouldn't be MVP. Here's a clip from Undisputed this morning.
The 5 touchdowns in this game against the Miami Dolphins, as crazy as it sounds, Skip, are almost as many as he had in the months of both September and November combined. In those months combined, he had 6 touchdowns passing. And so when you look at the full picture, I just don't see it. And again, people argue with me and they're like, man, you're just hating. I don't see how I'm hating. I'm just laying out the facts of the matter. If
you're not hating.
30
I'll
touchdowns.
be the first to say you're not hating. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic. I thought that was an unbelievable game. I thought he played really well against San Francisco. I think he's having a really good season. It's just when he had his MVP season, and it was unanimous, so you got to put an asterisk next to that because it was so outstanding that he was the first unanimous MVP in the history of the league. But he had 36 touchdown passes. Yeah. And then you look at him having 24 this year. He had 1,200 rushing yards. You look at it, he has about 843 or so this year. And so I don't see it as the same in that respect. And people are like, well, he should get MVP because of what? If the numbers aren't there, then there's not much to say. People were like, they were comparing it to the Peyton Manning season of 2008. I mean, that season he had 6 fourth-quarter comebacks. He led the league in QBR. There were things that happened late in that year that kind of pushed him over the top, but the stats weren't necessarily there. And again, that was 15 years ago. If I look at the last 20 MVPs of the National Football League, 3 of them being running backs, you had all-day Adrian Peterson, who had 2,000 yards. You had LaDainian with 31 total touchdowns. You had Sean Alexander with 28 total touchdowns. But outside of that, it's been quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks, there's only been 3, and 2 of them were co-MVPs in 2003, and that was Steve McNair and Peyton Manning. They had 29 total touchdowns for Steve McNair, 28 for Peyton, and they were co-MVPs. And then you have the 2008 Peyton season where he had 28 total touchdowns. And that's it. Everybody else had above 30 touchdowns. And so if you're going to tell me there was an MVP 20 years ago, they shared it, and then Peyton Manning 15 years ago, out of all the quarterbacks that have won it, and that's it, nobody else has had less than 30 touchdowns in the last decade, in the last 2 decades, then I'm going to say I would assume they would stick to that pattern. So I guess, Skip, but he's the betting favorite. So there's a chance he gets it, but I think it'll be one of them situations where they have to split it because he has under 30 touchdowns. So they split it like they did in 2003 with Steve McNair and Peyton, likely giving it to CMC or Tyreek and Lamar because, I guess that's what they're going to do because otherwise I just don't understand it.
Okay, just for the record, if you had a vote right here, right now, it would go to
Christian McCaffrey.
So look, he's missing a few key points, all right? This year is a weird year. He's talking about how we're resetting the standard of an MVP because we always give it to the person who has the best stats. We give it to the person who has the best stats on the best team usually. Someone who's dominating statistically and their team's dominating. Well, that doesn't really exist this year. The best stats right now, I guess, would be Josh Allen. He has 42 total touchdowns, but he hasn't been playing great as of recently. Their team has struggled a lot more than Baltimore has. Lamar and the Ravens have been in the driver's seat most of the season. So that has to be taken into consideration. You can't just say, oh, this person deserves it because they have the best numbers. There's so much more to football. The Ravens have dominated plenty of games. That Seattle game that the Ravens blew out, Lamar had like no touchdowns. So yeah, Lamar's touchdowns are a little bit down, but our running backs' touchdowns are up. So yeah, we decided to run in the red zone a little bit more. Does that take Lamar's impact away? He has more yards. He's gaining more yards than ever before, 4,500 total yards. I'm hearing McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill. I understand an argument for those guys. I completely understand an argument for those guys. I don't think Lamar is going to be a unanimous MVP like he was in 2019 because of those considerations. We just saw Tyreek Hill not show up in the biggest moment against Baltimore. Tua and Tyreek weren't able to get it done, right? And Tyreek's not going to get 2,000 yards. He's not going to break Calvin Johnson's record, most likely. Christian McCaffrey has had an incredible season. He's a couple touchdowns away from Jerry Rice's record, but he got hurt. He got banged up. He didn't finish the game. They've clinched everything. He's probably not even going to play next week. And a running back is just not quite as important as a quarterback to a team. I'm not saying they're not important. Christian McCaffrey has had an incredible year. He's dominated. He's brought a ton of value to that 49ers organization, but not as much as Lamar has brought to the Ravens. And I agree, if there was a 40-plus touchdown guy and he's consistently done well all year and they're a top seed or even the second seed and they're just cruising and dominating teams and it's because of that guy and he's got the stats, then give it to that guy. If the Bills were the 1 or 2 seed and having a ton of success and Josh Allen was consistent and he had 42 touchdowns, then he deserves it. But that's not happening this year. They just barely are getting in the playoffs. I know they're fighting for the division next week, but they just got into the playoffs like this week. You know what I mean? The Bills have been very up and down. Josh Allen has not been in the driver's seat all year long. Gus Edwards has 13 or so touchdowns. That takes away from Lamar. In Lamar's MVP year, he was getting a lot of those. So I totally get that stats are important, but it has to combine with the team's success. You can't just have stats in a shaky team. You have to be on the dominant team because that shows how much your value is. And Lamar's numbers aren't terrible. You know, he has 29 total touchdowns. I know that's lower, but the whole league has lower touchdowns. He's got more than Mahomes. Mahomes has 27. He's got more than Tua. Tua's got 28, leading the most prolific offense. Tua's got 28 total touchdowns. Lamar has 29. Like, stats matter to a certain extent, but team's dominance, team's impact on the field, and the way Lamar does it, that has to be taken into consideration. Like I said, I don't think he's going to be unanimous MVP. I can hear smaller arguments, but the majority is going to agree on Lamar Jackson. And why are we not talking about Lamar's total yards? He's right up there in total yards. He has more total yards than his MVP season. So your only argument for Lamar to not be MVP is total touchdowns. And he's probably not even going to play this week to add on to that, but he has 4,500 yards, 29 total touchdowns. The Ravens are 13-3, number 1 seed in the AFC, cruising, dominating teams right now. And like Sherman admitted, recency does play a role. If you're having success against top-tier teams at the end of the season in December, heading into the playoffs, and you're dominating them like this, especially at the height of the MVP conversation, it's Lamar versus Brock and McCaffrey. Well, Lamar dominated, best player on the field. And then the next week, Lamar versus Tyreek and Tua. Lamar dominates, 5 touchdowns. Like, he's showing you, and that's going to play a role, and he's going to win his second MVP. So let me know your guys' thoughts on the situation. I know it's a hot topic today, and I don't think we're going to see any more Lamar Jackson in the regular season, so we've probably already seen enough, and they're going to vote on his performance that's already happened. So now we can just kind of talk about it, and I feel like he's going to win, but we shall see. I appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Happy New Year. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.